How's it going, folks? This is Mike, and I'm back for the last video in my series of my top 100 favorite films. Okay, so thanks to everybody who stayed with me through all this, and also thank you to my friends James, DVD Collector 1974, and Ian Forkerball, who allowed me to take part in this series along with them. Once I got started with it, it was a lot of fun. So thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Now, these are films that I've talked about many, many times. They are my favorite films. So there's going to be a lot of things that you'll hear that you probably, if you keep up with my videos, I've talked about these many times before. So sorry for the repetition, but anyway, here goes. Starting at number 25, this is one of the best cool horror films ever made, House on Haunted Hill from 1958, starring Vincent Price, directed by William Castle, who was notorious for making kind of, I wouldn't say cheap, but let's say low budget, very fascinating little horror movies that always had a gimmick. And the gimmick in this one was that there was a plastic skeleton that was going to be floating on a wire across the film movie audience at a certain time in the movie. So Vincent Price is a guy who's giving a haunted house party, and this is a movie that I never get tired of watching. 1958, saw this in the theater when it first came out, and still love it today. If you are a first-time watcher of this film, there is at least one place early in the film where you will literally jump out of your chair. And those of you who have seen it know the scene I'm talking about. So, House on Haunted Hill. Coming in next, a thriller of a very different kind. This is David Lynch's Mulholland Drive from 2001. A mystery within a mystery within a mystery. Is it a dream? What part of it is a dream? When does she wake up? It's just absolutely fascinating, beautiful cinematography. I don't want to give any details away except that Naomi Watts plays a young woman named Betty who comes to Hollywood to visit her aunt who was involved in the motion picture industry, and she's also got a chance to audition for a movie role. Okay, so that's what it's all about. And she gets herself involved in this bizarre mystery with another woman played by Laura Elena Haring, and Justin Theroux is in it. Ann Miller, classic MGM dancer. Ann Miller is in it. I think that was her last film or all. Billy Ray Cyrus shows up. All kinds of weird things going on in this film, and it's absolutely fascinating. Never get tired of watching it. Okay, next up, classic of a different kind. This is Singing in the Rain, or Singing in the Rain, from 1952, MGM, starring Gene Kelly, Donald O'Connor, and Debbie Reynolds in what many people consider to be the best Hollywood musical ever made. It's very much a Hollywood story. It's a musical comedy about the early days of sound films and what a strain it was for the studios and the people who acted in films to make the transition from silent films into talkies and all the things they had to do to start recording people's voices and make them sound like they were actually speaking in a normal tone of voice. And it's great music, great dancing, iconic scene where Gene Kelly is doing the title tune on the MGM backlot with rain pouring down over him, and he was dying with the flu at the time, but you would never know it by the big smile on his face. Just a beautiful film that never get tired of. Okay. Next up is a Bette Davis classic from 1940, one of my favorite Bette Davis performances, The Letter, directed by William Wyler, based on a story by W. Somerset Maugham about a woman named Leslie Crosby, who is, at the beginning of the film, she is seen shooting a man who is leaving her bungalow, the place where she lives with her husband, and she shoots him 6 times. And she claims that the man assaulted her and tried to have sex with her, and that she got scared and that's why she shot him. But there is in existence a letter which tells a very different story. So Leslie is pulled into this courtroom drama. We find out a lot about this very passionate woman who was hiding her passion under these very proper manners, and it's just a great performance by Bette Davis. Okay, what can I say? Next up is a classic horror film from 1961 called The Innocence, starring Deborah Kerr, based on the Henry James short novel The Turn of the Screw. It's about a governess, in an English governess, who is very, very repressed, a spinster, and she's very shy, very repressed, who goes way, way out in the country to this beautiful, beautiful house with these sumptuous grounds, gardens and lakes, and she just falls in love with the place. She's there to be a governess to these two children who are orphans, and she finds herself being pulled into the mystery of what has happened in the house before she came, and she thinks she's starting to see and hear ghosts of the former governess and her lover, who was the I guess the groundskeeper or something like that. And she starts fantasizing about these people exhibiting all the signs of paranoid schizophrenia. But the viewer of the film sees the ghosts as well. So what is true and what isn't? It's beautiful to look at, and truly one of the most atmospheric films ever made. Black and white cinematography. Deborah Kerr is fantastic, as are the two child actors who co-star with her. Let's see, what were their names again? Martin Stevens and Pamela Franklin. Highly recommended. This is out on Criterion. Next up is one of my favorite Alfred Hitchcock films, The Birds, from 1963. Tippi Hedren, Rod Taylor, Jessica Tandy, Suzanne Plachette. You never really know what's happening or why anything is happening about this, but Tippi Hedren's character goes out to a remote island community in California to take a pair of lovebirds to a man she met on the mainland in San Francisco, and she wants the guy's played by Rod Taylor. So she comes out here with these birds just as kind of a joke, and she's also interested in this man. And while she's there, birds start attacking the community for no apparent reason. Fantastic special effects. I understand they're going to remake this film, and I think that's very sad because I can't imagine you would want to watch anything but this. Just a great, great film. You never know what the hell is going on. There's also a great kind of a psychological story going on between Rod Taylor and his mother, played by Jessica Tandy, who does not like him to be involved with other women. Not that the two of them are involved, but it's a very strange relationship. But the fact that Tippi Hedren's character is there because she's attracted to this man brings all kinds of weird tension to the family. So anyway, The Birds, great, great film. Next up is Fellini's 8½, a film I've talked about many, many times. This was filmed in 1962 and not released until 1963 because Fellini took forever to edit his films. And this one, when he finished this, it was over 4 hours long, so he had to edit it down quite a bit. It's the story of a filmmaker, played by Marcello Mastroianni, who is having a nervous breakdown at a time when he's trying to figure out how to finish a very expensive science fiction film that he's been working on, and he's just completely blocked, and he doesn't know what to do. And he starts going into fantasy about his past life, remembering his life with his parents, his clashes with the religious establishment, his sexual awakenings, all the women he's ever known or fantasized about. They all start coming to him in fantasy, and also all of the people around him in real life who are crowding around him because they want something to do with his films, or they have an attraction to him, or his wife and his mistress are they're both vying for his attentions. It's a beautiful, very complicated film, great dialogue, beautiful cinematography, and I don't know, just a classic. For those of you who have never seen this, it is highly recommended. Fellini's 8½. Next up is a film that everybody loves, and I do too, The Wizard of Oz, from 1939. Judy Garland plays Dorothy, and she was Dorothy forever after that because everybody wanted to see her in that image. The girl who goes over the rainbow, sings the beautiful song, and it's such a treat to see Judy Garland and to realize what a mature actress she was, even at the age of 16. And they were trying to make her look like she was 12, which is what the character was, and they didn't succeed. she was very mature for her age, but she was also a very mature actress. And if you look at the way she delivers her lines and the way she, just everything about her, I mean, she's just really fantastic in this. And the music is beautiful. Thank God they kept Over the Rainbow in the film, because they originally wanted to cut it out because they thought that it slowed the film down too much. Can you imagine that? All right, next up is another classic horror film. This is The Haunting from 1963, directed by Robert Wise, starring Julie Harris Claire Bloom, Russ Tamblyn, and Richard Johnson. This is based on a short novel by Shirley Jackson called The Haunting of Hill House. It's just beautifully made. Still one of the most frightening motion pictures ever made. Great black and white photography. It's one of those rare instances where they made a film of a great book and they did a great film as well. So I don't know. I just love it. And if you haven't seen this, I think this has now come out on Criterion as well, and I haven't gotten it yet. So next up, another classic horror film. I love horror movies. I can't help it. This is The Uninvited from the year 1944, released by Paramount, starring Ray Milland, Ruth Hussey, Donald Crisp, and a beautiful young actress named Gail Russell. A very imaginative and kind of a combination of comedy and drama. There are a lot of funny lines in it. It's not always just relentlessly scary, but when it gets scary and the ghosts start appearing, it really is some heavy stuff. They do it very, very well. It also it has a beautiful score written by Victor Young. The theme music of this, which figures into a scene in the film where the character played by Gail Russell named Stella is being photographed in front of a night sky, this big window in the house that's haunted, and you see the starlight over her beautiful face. And the theme music came to be called Stella by Starlight, and it became a standard. A couple of years down the road, somebody wrote lyrics for the song, and it's just absolutely beautiful. But one of the best horror films ever made. Highly recommended. Okay. Next up is one of my favorite John Cassavetes films from 1977 or 78. I'm not sure. I think it's 77. Opening Night. Opening Night, starring Gena Rowlands, Ben Gazzara, and Joan Blondell, and John Cassavetes is in this as well. It's a great performance by Gena Rowlands, one of the best things she ever did. She plays an actress who is approaching middle age and not handling it very well. She's very unhappy about becoming older. And she, at the time the film was made, she happens to be doing a play, or rehearsing for a play, about a woman who is growing older and is not handling it well. So fantasy and reality are driving this woman crazy because they're combining, and she's not doing well in her personal life, and what the play is about is making her just really upset and downright delusional. So just a lot of interesting things happening. It's a very physical performance by Gena Rowlands. She's just all over the place. One of the best things she ever did. Okay. Next up, absolute classic that I've talked about many, many times, but I'm happy to talk about it again, and that is the original Frankenstein from 1931, directed by James Whale, starring Boris Karloff. What can I say? I had the pleasure of seeing this on the big screen about maybe 2 years ago, after having seen it on television so many times, but it just came to life in a new and different way, as they always do when you see them up on a big screen. But fantastic expressionistic photography. It is no longer possible for people to be scared by this. I guess maybe if you see it for the first time, but it's still very shocking. The first time you see the monster and the way they shoot his face at different angles and kind of quick cuts, it is still very shocking to this day. And beautiful performance by Karloff. Okay, started the Frankenstein dynasty that we still have to this day. Next up is another one of my favorite films that I've talked about a lot, and that is Rebel Without a Cause from 1955, starring James Dean, Natalie Wood, Sal Mineo, directed by Nicholas Ray. A film which still gets to me every time I see it. I mean, I had the pleasure of seeing this also on the big screen twice last year, very, very close together in time. And it still got to me. As soon as they start the music, I mean, I start crying. I don't know what it is, just something about the story and about James Dean and his sincerity, and the other two young players that are with him, Sal Mineo and Natalie Wood. It just grabs me every time. Even though this was well, when this film was made, I was just very, very young, so I wasn't a teenager when this came out. Teenagers of the time had always said that it had a profound effect on the way they thought about their lives and about being that age. So for me, it was kind of like watching what the older kids were doing, and I just today, I don't know, I still get that feeling. So can't help it. Next up is classic film noir from 1945, low budget classic Detour, starring Tom Neal and Ann Savage, directed by Edgar G. Ulmer, made in about 2 weeks. Just I don't know, just everything comes together in absolute perfection in this low budget classic, which was released for a very short time and then disappeared, and then only in the 70s and 80s people started to finally give it the appreciation that it always deserved. Good acting by Tom Neal and Ann Savage, especially by Ann Savage. Okay, Detour. Next up is one of my favorite science fiction classics, Forbidden Planet, which I absolutely love. I will never ever get over this movie. Still like it to this day. Starring Leslie Nielsen, Walter Pidgeon, Anne Francis, and Robbie the Robot. Beautiful color, made at MGM. They threw a lot of money and a lot of resources at it, and it wasn't a huge hit at the time. But I just a lot of people laugh at it this day, but not me. I take it very seriously. I'm looking forward to seeing this on the big screen in a local theater in about 2 weeks. So that'll be a real treat. Next up, one of my favorite horror films. I've talked about this incessantly. This is The Pit and the Pendulum, starring Vincent Price, John Carr, Barbara Steele, and Luana Anders, directed by Roger Corman in 1961. The second of Roger Corman's films based on Edgar Allan Poe stories, which really have nothing to do with the Edgar Allan Poe stories, just the titles mainly. But I love all of those films that Corman made, but this is my favorite, and probably because Barbara Steele is in it, because she just so fantastic. Very small part, but she just looks terrific, and she's the only actress in history that, in my opinion, can make you take your eyes off of Vincent Price, and nobody crawls out of a coffin like Barbara Steele. So if you have not seen this, give it a chance. Next up is Sunset Boulevard from 1950, directed by Billy Wilder, William Holman, Gloria Swanson, and Eric von Stroheim, in a film that is both film noir and melodrama, and it's also very much a Hollywood story. Swanson plays a former silent film star whose career was ended at the coming of sound. And she's been living for about 20 years in seclusion. She's losing her mind, and she's basically living in the past in a house that's filled with pictures of her younger self, and with Eric von Stroheim as her butler, who also used to be one of her directors and was even closer to her than that, as you will find out when you see the movie, if you haven't seen it yet. But a lot of people thought that Gloria Swanson was playing herself, because she also was a great silent film actress all the way back to about 1915 or 16, and made the transition to sound quite well. And unfortunately, her box office just started to drop off, maybe because people wanted new faces. So after the mid-1930s, she left films, went on the stage, became a very successful businesswoman, and was not living as a recluse. But she jumped at the chance to play this part, and she did it very, very well. Some great scenes in this movie, especially the end where she has completely lost her mind, and she's sort of walking into the camera, and her image fades into the camera lights. That's wonderful. I'm babbling, but if you haven't seen this, please give it a chance. Okay. Next up is my favorite Woody Allen film of all time, Hannah and Her Sisters, from 1986, starring Woody Allen himself, also Mia Farrow, Barbara Hershey, Diane Weist, Max von Sydow, Michael Caine. Just a fantastic combination of comedy and drama. It's a very serious story, really, but a lot of it is also very funny. The parts with Woody are funny. He's a guy who thinks he has a brain tumor, and he he's worried to death about what's going to happen if I die. What if there's no afterlife? So he goes into all these changes, but the conclusion he comes to by the end of the film is actually very beautiful. It's a very beautiful message, and it also has messages with the other characters about what it means to be in love and what it means to be renewed through love. So it's just a great, great film, Hannah and Her Sisters. Okay. Next up, from 1977 or 78, it might be 78, Terrence Malick's Days of Heaven, starring Richard Gere, Brooke Adams, Sam Shepard, and a young actress named Linda Manns, who is the narrator of the story. Now, this film is not so much, I mean, it has a linear story and character development, but even more than that, it's just kind of a dreamlike vision. And it's more important for its feeling and its hypnotic cinematography and the way it just kind of goes straight to your heart, I guess, rather than your head, about these people who get involved in the wheat fields of the great Midwest. It has to be seen to be understood. Terrence Malick at his absolute hypnotic best. Days of Heaven. Okay. Next up, one of my favorite Bette Davis films, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, from 1962, starring Bette Davis and Joan Crawford and Victor Buono. Again, another Hollywood story. This is about two sisters, one of whom was a child star in vaudeville way back in the 1910s, who later on tries to become an actress and fails as an adult to be established in the entertainment world, even though she was a big success as a child. But her sister, who was in her shadow when they were very, very young, has become a great movie star. So they have this great rivalry. So an accident happens where the sister, played by Joan Crawford, is crippled, and everyone thinks that Baby Jane, her sister, has done it. So they are now living as two reclusive characters in this house in Hollywood and basically driving each other crazy. Actually, Joan Crawford is going more crazy than Bette Davis, but everything about this is first rate. I mean, it goes into Grand Guignol quite a bit, but it has good characterizations as well. Some of the best acting that Bette Davis has ever done. And Joan Crawford is also very, very good, especially in the scene where, as a cripple, she has to go down a flight of stairs. I mean, she makes it 100% believable. You feel that agony as she takes every movement down the steps. It's really wonderful. Okay, next up is another movie I've talked about many times, and it's a pleasure to bring it up again. That is Seconds, from 1966, directed by John Frankenheimer. Once again, I want to recommend that everybody who has not taken the time to watch Seconds, please give it a chance. Rock Hudson plays a man who has been given literally a second chance in life to become another person. And he finds out that getting everything you want does not always make you happy. It's a beautiful film. It's creepy. It's a science fiction theme without the ambiance of science fiction. Okay, and like my friend James Higgins has said when he's talked about this, he said that it's like an extended episode of the old Twilight Zone TV show. That's very true. This is a fantastic movie. So, Seconds. All right, next up, another Bette Davis classic, All About Eve, from 1950. Bette Davis plays Margot Channing, a legendary Broadway actress who is now 40 years old, very much concerned about being old and being replaced by a younger actress, and also by losing her much younger boyfriend, played by Gary Merrill. So into her life, into Margot's life, comes Eve Harrington, played by Anne Baxter, who is a young woman who seems to worship Margot, is taken to Margot's life and into her confidence, and then we find out that, and Margot finds out that Eve has some very ulterior motives. Just fantastic movie all the way around. Best Picture of 1950, great dialogue. Marilyn Monroe is in it. Thelma Ritter is in it. Don't miss it. Okay, I have 3 versions of this film, 3 different. I don't know why I'm showing you that, but I am. Okay, here's my number 1 Alfred Hitchcock film, Vertigo, from 1958. James Stewart and Kim Novak in a dreamlike fantasy classic that was not very well appreciated when it first came out, but is now, I think it's made it to the top or near to the top of the greatest films ever made lists and all that sort of thing. I absolutely love it. So, okay, what can I say? I've talked about Vertigo so much already. Next up, I've talked about this too way too many times. Black Sunday, Mario Bava's 1960 vampire classic, starring Barbara Steele and John Richardson. Originally called The Mask of Satan, and released in America a year later in 1961 in a slightly different version, and that's when they gave it the title Black Sunday. It's all Barbara Steele plays a witch who is executed for well, she's supposedly a witch and a vampire, or she comes back as a vampire 200 years later to try to take over the life and the body of her look-alike descendant, also played by Barbara Steele. And what's memorable about this film, certainly not the dialogue, it's the way it looks. The cinematography is absolutely just gorgeous. I mean, just it's kind of relentlessly beautiful. And Barbara Steele is wonderful in the film that, although it was not her film debut, it was the film that made her a star overnight, and she will always be remembered for it. And just can't recommend it enough. It is a great, great, great horror film and an art film as well. So, all right. And my number one movie, it's a pleasure always to talk about The Night of the Hunter from 1955, directed by Charles Laughton, starring Robert Mitchum, Shelley Winters, and Lillian Gish, in a story based on a novel by Davis Grubb. Robert Mitchum plays a preacher. Well, he's supposed to be a preacher, but he's really a nut who likes to destroy. He likes to kill women. He has this very messed up attitude about women, and he kills them and takes their money. So he finds out about a young widow named, well, played by Shelley Winters, who has 2 young children, who has some money, and he decides to find her and get her to marry him so that he can find the money. Well, that sounds very simple, but it doesn't turn out to be that way. One of the most beautiful films ever made. Charles Laughton directed this and directed no other films, because when this came out, it was not a success. It didn't stay in theaters very long, and it didn't get a lot of critical success. But of course now, all these years later, it's also either number 1 or close to number 1 on everybody's favorite list. It's a combination of a fairy tale, film noir, melodrama, a little bit of black comedy thrown in, and it's just beautiful. I love it. It goes from, it has maybe 4 different parts to it. It starts out as one thing, and then it goes into this surrealistic fairy tale, and then it goes into melodrama at the end. Great acting by Robert Mitchum, and just can't say enough about it. And I'm already 27 minutes long in this video, so it's a good time to stop. So I'm all finished with my top 100 film list, and I thank you for watching. Comments and questions are always welcome. So take care, folks. Turn this off right here.